AO dated a girl with a narcissistic ex who showed up unannounced at her place while I was there, and I feel bad about how I reacted. Hi, first and foremost, I apologize if my English is not flawless. So, I met a girl and we connected immediately. We communicated through text for 2 to 3 weeks, including some suggestive messaging, and then went on 5 dates. Everything seemed to be going splendidly. She assured me she was not seeing anyone else and had paused her dating app account because she wanted to devote her time to us and give our relationship a chance. She shared with me multiple times that she had a tumultuous relationship with a narcissistic ex who constantly troubled her. He refused to retrieve his belongings from her home, persistently called her several times each week, etc. She insisted she was finished with him, revealing that he had cheated on her with approximately 15 women and that there was no romantic bond between them. She wanted him out of her life. When I inquired about why she continued to engage with him or hold on to his things and suggested she be more resolute, she expressed her belief in karma and maintained that she is not a bad person. Ultimately, she wanted closure for both of them and hoped to part on good terms, which struck me as irrational since, just a month prior, he had sent her an anonymous letter to her workplace filled with lies in an attempt to sabotage her job because she did not want him back. Nevertheless, I remained calm about it. However, during our last date, an alarming situation arose. We were at her home, sharing kisses, when around 11 p.m., her ex showed up on her patio, banging on the window and shouting. I was taken aback and suggested she call the police, as this guy was clearly unstable. To my shock, she opened the patio door, which I perceived as reckless, putting both her and myself in jeopardy. She told him to leave, and that his behavior was inappropriate, but he forcibly pushed his way into her house. I confronted him, but he screamed that it was his house, a blatant lie, that she was his wife, another untruth, and falsely claimed that they had been intimate the previous night. He demanded that I leave several times, but I refused, insisting that he posed a danger and that I wouldn't abandon her. She threatened to call the authorities, and after about 15 minutes of trying to reason with him, she indeed called the police, prompting him to flee, although he attempted to hit her as he left. This entire episode left me traumatized, and we, of course, had a conversation about it afterward. I expressed my concerns about his instability and my desire not to let this incident jeopardize our relationship, and she concurred. Following that, she confessed that her ex had stayed in her bed the previous night, but insisted there was no sexual or romantic involvement. She explained that he had shown up unexpectedly, wanting to talk, and ended up crying and expressing how much he missed his children, though he'd shown no concern for years, in a blatant attempt to manipulate her. By the way, these children were not theirs, as he had kids with another woman he had previously cheated on with the ex she was now dating. She told me she had actually tried to help him find a way to reconnect with his children, and that he implored her to let him stay over since he didn't want to drive home late. She agreed, allowing him to sleep on the couch, but he complained about a bad back and insisted on sleeping in the main bed, claiming he wouldn't do anything inappropriate. She permitted it, and of course, during the night, he made advances toward her, which she rebuffed, warning him that she would remove him if he didn't stop. The next morning, she even made him a sandwich, claiming she wanted to be a good person. With this information, I felt quite bewildered. The following day, I reached out, wanting to discuss the situation as I felt uncomfortable about everything that had transpired. She replied that she needed time to process it all, indicating that because I had questions, she couldn't engage with her trauma effectively and required space to heal. I went silent for 2 days, then requested a conversation, only for her to express that she felt judged and unappreciated for my cold behavior. She was displeased that I seemed uncomfortable with the fact her ex had shared a bed with her, arguing that we had only been on 5 to 6 dates and had merely communicated for a month. Thus, it was not an official relationship. She stated that, even if she had done something inappropriate, it wasn't my place to judge her. Ultimately, I sent her a lengthy voice message explaining that, at the end of the day, if our relationship wasn't meant to progress, I was all right with it, but I needed to address the situation because I believed she lacked boundaries. I also felt that her ex's actions were unacceptable and that she should have filed charges against him, which she was hesitant to do, claiming that no one deserves that. I acknowledged that while she had every right to date or be intimate with other people, I found it evident that we were attempting to establish a connection, and I was hurt to learn that on the night prior to our date, she had spent all evening with her abusive ex. I found it unacceptable that he had manipulated her into sleeping in her bed and sharing time together. She became extremely upset, telling me that nobody understood the struggles they faced together, that he was alone in a different country without family, and that he wasn't the evil one she had acted out of compassion because she is a good person. I expressed concern that she wasn't seeing the bigger picture and that it was abnormal for someone as problematic as her ex to maintain so much control over her life, even a year after their breakup. I feared that she was still trapped in an abusive, trauma-bound relationship. While I believed her assertion that she was not interested in him nor had slept with him, I still regarded it as a significant red flag and somewhat disrespectful to us. The fact that she had opened the door had put us both at risk, with her justification being that had she not opened it, he likely would have broken the window. I conceded that I might be the unreasonable one in this situation, since she could ultimately do as she pleased. But I was deeply hurt to know she was still communicating with her ex, who could arrive at any moment, and she would simply allow him to dictate her life, seeking attention or attempting to manipulate her into reconciling, etc. Ultimately, she accused me of being judgmental toward him and claimed that I was critiquing her life choices, insisting that he possessed both good and bad qualities and that I should not have felt threatened by him, trusting that she was loyal to me. She mentioned that her friends thought I was wrong to feel this way, acknowledging that it was ill-advised to permit him to sleep in her bed, yet contending that it should not have bothered me since we were not an official couple and that it wasn't sexual in nature. In turn, I informed her that I had consulted my friends and most agreed with my perspective, highlighting that the situation was a considerable red flag and suggesting I should distance myself from her. At this point, she became extremely agitated and blocked me. So, to summarize, I have been dating a girl for 1.5 months, 5 official dates, including suggestive messaging, discussions about exclusivity, etc. She has a troubled narcissistic ex who continues to contact her, claiming she has moved on and harbors no romantic feelings for him but wishes to part amicably. The ex arrived at her house while I was present, late at night, became aggressive, and she let him in. She has no desire to file charges against him. I discovered that the ex had been at her residence the night before, attempting to manipulate her with tears about regretting his past actions. The girl I'm dating said that her compassionate nature and belief in karma motivated her to spend the entire night conversing with him, though she clarified she wanted nothing to do with him moving forward. I learned that the ex requested to sleep in her bed, which she allowed, despite telling him not to make advances, and when he did, she still chose to keep him there, even preparing him breakfast the next day. The next day, when I sought to discuss my discomfort, she accused me of overwhelming her with questions and stated she required time to process everything. She expressed feeling pressured by me and maintained that because she was the victim and we were not officially a couple, I should not feel threatened by the situation, asserting that she remained loyal and that she had done nothing wrong. I reached out for a conversation, expressing my concern about her ex having so much influence over her life even a year after their separation, and articulated my distress regarding his overnight stay, emphasizing my worry about her boundaries. She accused me of being judgmental, claiming no one understood her experience, suggesting the ex wasn't a pure villain or saint, and that I shouldn't hold her actions against her since she did nothing inappropriate. She insisted we should have waited to process everything before discussing and moving forward, feeling that I was judging her choices from a superior stance, culminating in her blocking me because she perceived I was dismissing her understanding of the situation. I am now uncertain if I am in the wrong or if she is, and I am unsure if I overreacted. Story 2. She cheated and lied to my face. This is how I found out. Sometimes, a single event can obliterate everything you have worked so hard to establish over the years. One phone call, one statement, and suddenly, you are no longer the person you were just a moment before. My name is Mike, and this experience altered my life forever. Chapter 1. An ordinary evening, I had been in a relationship with Emily for nearly 4 years. Everyone believed we were the ideal couple. I was convinced she was the one. We made plans, discussed our future, laughed, argued, and then reconciled. Everything felt undeniably genuine. I wouldn't claim that everything was flawless. We had our squabbles occasionally, but who doesn't? At times, I sensed she was somewhat detached, but I attributed it to the pressures of work or her personal difficulties. That evening, I was at home, lounging on the couch while scrolling through my phone. Emily had mentioned that she was going out with her friends and would return late. I felt at ease because I trusted her. However, once she left, an unexplainable sense of discomfort washed over me, a persistent emptiness. I tried to dismiss it, yet the anxiety remained. Then the phone rang. Chapter 2. The call that changed everything. Mike, where are you right now? It was Jake, my friend. The tension in his voice was palpable. At home, why? Listen, maybe I'm overreacting, but I just saw Emily. So what? She's not on house arrest. Yeah, but she was with another guy, I chuckled. Could be anyone. Yeah, but he had his arm around her waist and they entered a hotel. Silence fell. I felt a cold grip tighten around my throat. What? Yeah, I was shocked too, but it was just 10 minutes ago. I thought I was imagining it, Buttman. It looked really odd. I remained silent, trying to formulate a response. Maybe you were mistaken. Mike, I was 5 meters away from them. That was Emily. I took a deep breath, certain that this must be some kind of nightmare and that I would awaken at any moment. What hotel? He provided me with the address. All right, I'll call you back. I hung up and stared blankly at the wall. What am I doing? This is madness. She wouldn't do that. It must be a ridiculous coincidence. Perhaps it is a business meeting. Maybe he's just a friend. Yet, just 5 minutes later, I found myself sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel, struggling to keep my thoughts in check. Chapter 3. Waiting at the hotel, I stood across from the hotel, trembling. Each second felt interminable. Time dragged until the doors finally swung open. Emily. She was adjusting her hair, her face illuminated by a subtle smile. Right behind her was a tall, well-dressed man. He said something that made her laugh, a laugh she hadn't shared with me in a long time. I observed them say their goodbyes. He leaned in, whispered something to her, and she nodded, smiling. At that moment, the truth hit me. This was not a mistake. It was not a coincidence. It marked the end. Chapter 4. The conversation. I waited until she walked away from the hotel before I called her. Hi. Her voice sounded upbeat, as if everything was fine. Where are you? With my friends. My heart raced. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to ask her why she was lying, but the words wouldn't come. Are you sure? Yeah, why? I hesitated, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. Turn around. 3 seconds passed. Slowly, she turned and saw me. Her face in that instant, I will never forget it. Mike, what are you doing here? I stepped closer. Good question, Emily. Now, please answer me. She swallowed, swiftly tucking her phone into her pocket. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I clenched my fists. Then explain. She froze, avoiding eye contact. He's just a friend. A friend? I gestured toward the hotel. Is it common for you to walk through hotels with friends? She fell silent. I could see her expression shift as she struggled to fabricate an excuse. Mike, you're lying directly to me. She stepped toward me, but I backed away. Mike, please, let's talk. I stared at her, and at that moment, she was no longer the person I cherished. The individual before me was a stranger. There's nothing to discuss, Emily. I turned and walked away. She called out after me, but I didn't acknowledge her. My pace quickened, nearly escalating to a run. I didn't know how to avoid breaking apart, but I needed to leave. Chapter 5. The aftermath. Once at home, I sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Emily sent me countless messages and called, but I didn't reply. Each call, every message ripped me apart. I felt a tightening inside, refusing to let go. The following day, I packed her belongings and placed them by the door. When she arrived, I stood with my arms crossed. Mike, do you really not want to talk? You made your choice, now I will make mine. She cried, but I felt no sympathy. I could not summon compassion. I needed to survive, not to wallow in regret. When the door closed behind her, I came to a realization. I had lost her. But the worst part was not simply losing her. I lost myself. Chapter 6. A new beginning. After the ordeal with Emily, it took me a long time to gather myself. I couldn't comprehend how she could betray me. All the feelings I had for her crumbled like a sandcastle. Merely thinking of her brought forth a chill and pain within. I replayed all our shared moments, and now they all felt like fabrications. I felt deceived, abandoned, and ultimately hollow. But with each passing day, the pain became a bit more manageable. Gradually, I understood that life doesn't end with a breakup. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I recognized that I needed to progress. I began spending more time with friends, going out frequently, exercising, and regaining the strength to smile. In due course, I started to feel a little better. The grief didn't vanish, but I learned to coexist with it. And one day, I came to realize that perhaps I could find happiness again. Chapter 7. The meeting. I was seated in a cafe, savoring my coffee when they walked in. I immediately recognized Emily. She was alongside him, the same man, Alex. My chest tightened, and a cold shiver coursed through my spine. Emily spotted me first. She flinched slightly upon seeing me, her complexion drained of color. I stood up and approached their table. "Hey," I said, trying to maintain my composure, but the tension within me was overwhelming. "Mike, hey." Her tone was tense, and she was clearly making an effort to remain calm. "How's it going?" I asked, once again attempting to sound neutral. "Everything's fine," she replied with a hint of awkwardness. "This is my boyfriend, Alex." I turned to look at him. Alex met my gaze with a genuinely friendly smile, as if nothing had ever happened. "Nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand, though internally, everything felt different. "Likewise," he responded, slightly taken aback, but also making an effort to be courteous. We exchanged small talk about how the past weeks had treated us and how we were faring. Emily expressed remorse for everything that had transpired, but I told her I bore no grudges. I didn't know what else to say, and honestly, I didn't wish to delve further into the subject. Afterwards, we bid our farewells and went our separate ways. That concluded our conversation. Chapter 8. The truth. Eventually, I learned that Alex was an old friend of Emily's. They had known one another for many years. All during that time, he had been there for her, hoping for a chance, and I had been completely oblivious. I don't blame her for succumbing. I blame her for failing to communicate with me. She didn't share her doubts and feelings. Yet, all of this serves as a lesson for me and for both of us. Chapter 9. Forgiveness. I contemplated whether to forgive Emily. Accepting that all our shared moments now bore an emptiness was challenging. However, with time, I came to understand that she was not completely content either. She had made a mistake, yet I could see that she was hurting as well. I forgave her, not because I forgot everything, but because I recognized that if I didn't forgive, I would remain anchored in the past, unable to move forward. Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. It is a means to liberate oneself from the past and provide an opportunity for the present. Chapter 10. New love. Eventually, I met Sarah. She was nothing like Emily. Our relationship didn't begin with promises or elaborate words. We simply spent time together. It was more straightforward than I had anticipated. Sarah did not insist that I forget the past. She was just present, aiding me in becoming a better person and restoring my belief in myself. Perhaps we have yet to find all the answers, but perhaps now I am prepared for the next chapter. And maybe one day, Emily and I will cross paths again, but with a fresh perspective, and then I will be ready to forgive. Story 3. I became genuinely so overwhelmed living with my parents, but moving out isn't an option for the next several months. I don't know how I can make it another week-long post. For context, my mother suffers from major depressive disorder, anxiety, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My father deals with obsessive-compulsive disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism. I experience anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism as well. My parents are in their 50s, while I am in my late teens. They are currently in the early stages of obtaining a divorce after nearly 20 years of marriage. My parents have not been sexually intimate for at least the past 14 years, and they have remained together this long primarily due to my brother and me, financial difficulties, and my mother's mental health struggles. I believe the divorce will be fairly straightforward, as both of them want to end the marriage. We reside on a horse farm, which my mother despises, so she plans to move into an apartment. They have also come to an agreement regarding finances. Everyone is in therapy to address their mental health issues. Now, as for some background information, my mother has been grappling with her depression throughout my entire life. She often copes with it by sleeping, which means that most of my childhood memories involve her lying down in some way. My father spent a considerable amount of time working, resulting in few memories of him until I reached my mid-teens. I suffered a significant amount of emotional neglect until I was approximately 13 years old. Recently, I have been processing my trauma related to my mother in therapy, yet I harbor a great deal of resentment and anger towards her. I often project these feelings onto her, ultimately damaging whatever relationship we had in recent years. I feel immense rage for that little girl who was afraid to walk too loudly past her mother's room and who longed to come home from school to find her mother awake. In recent years, my mother has made significant strides in managing her depression. However, I still struggle to forgive her for being so neglectful for so long. It feels as though the only reason she has begun to improve is because I became depressed and suicidal, leading to my hospitalization for 2 weeks. If I hadn't fallen apart and wished to end my life, she would still be lying in that bed. My 6-year-old self, who simply wanted her mother to play outside with her, was not enough of a motivation for her to improve, but my 13-year-old self, who devised a plan to end her own life, was sufficient. I recognize that this is unfair to her, but I cannot seem to release this resentment and anger, and I am uncertain if I ever will. She is planning to move out within the next month or two as a result of the divorce, but she continues to try to control aspects of my life and strives to finally be the mother I always wanted as a child. All I desire is for her to move out and refrain from reaching out to me until I am prepared for a relationship, if that ever happens. I need the space to mourn my childhood and process my feelings in peace. However, that is impossible when the sight of her makes me want to lash out. I'm exhausted from these emotions. I am incredibly tired. Now, for some context regarding my father. He consistently struggles with following through on the commitments he makes. You might ask him for help with something, and he promises to assist you in 30 minutes or when he finishes eating. However, he rarely follows through. I cannot stress enough that this happens all the time. I could provide more specific examples of this behavior, yet explaining all of them would take considerable effort, and I lack the mental bandwidth for that at this moment. I understand that his word is generally unreliable, yet I still find myself asking for his help with various tasks, only to feel deeply hurt each time he fails to show up as promised. I realize I should not depend on him for assistance every time I need it, and I typically handle my problems independently. However, one of the few things I cannot resolve myself is my sense of loneliness. When I do ask him for help, it is usually because the loneliness has become overwhelming. I know I cannot expect him to recognize my loneliness, yet I have explained to him how difficult it is for me to express my need for companionship, which is why I usually ask for help with specific tasks instead. I have communicated this several times, but he continues to let me down. We argued about this today, and he insisted that I treat him the same way all the time. I understand his perspective, but I do not think it is fair for us to be held to the same standard. Due to my mother's issues and my father's responsibilities, I am the one who manages all the laundry, takes care of all communication regarding the horse farm, does 70% of the household cleaning, transports my younger brother and his friends, oversees the well-being of my 3 horses, and attends school full-time. I am also a young adult who is navigating life and coming to terms with my recent diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism. I can typically go a week or so without having a breakdown. When I refer to a breakdown, I mean sleeping for 12-15 hours straight despite normally only getting for 6 hours a night. This usually means my father has to take care of my chores one morning and drive my brother to and from school that day. He claims this is equivalent to not fulfilling his promises. While I acknowledge that, technically, it is similar, is it truly fair for him to hold me to the same standard as himself? Additionally, I do not neglect my scheduled horse chores more than once or twice a week, whereas he consistently fails to fulfill his commitments every day. Is it fair for him to compare his shortcomings to mine? This feels deeply unjust. It is also important to note that my horses are not adversely affected by my occasional inability to cope. They continue to receive timely care and all necessary provisions. Because of my various responsibilities, I complete all my schoolwork online and have a minimal social life. I do not have any friends my age and primarily communicate only with my immediate family and barn employees. I do not discuss my thoughts with my mother because I can hardly tolerate being around her. Furthermore, I avoid talking to my father about most issues, as I do not want to invest in our relationship if I cannot trust him to be present when I genuinely need him. My brother is younger than I am, and I would never wish to burden him with my feelings the way my mother did with me. He deserves at least one stable person in his life, and I strive to be that person for him. I have recently begun therapy, so it may take some time until it becomes a safe space for me to express myself, considering that my history and trauma have not yet been fully detailed. Thus, I find myself feeling like I have no one to confide in. I am overwhelmed and frustrated with everything I experience and feel uncertain about how to address it. I want to scream, cry, and escape. My chest aches from the loneliness and hurt I encounter daily, and I am unsure of how to cope. All I want is someone to hold me and assure me that everything will be all right. My next step in education is to attend college 3 hours away from home, hopefully in the fall. I plan to bring my 3 horses with me and keep them at a nearby stable while working hard to make things work. I genuinely wish to leave this place and enjoy college life for a few years. I want to experience life as a young adult for once. I desire to indulge in partying, have casual relationships, and let my biggest concern be an upcoming exam. However, I do not know if I can allow myself to let go. I also question whether I can leave my brother behind without being consumed by guilt. I am uncertain about whether I could even leave my father. While 3 hours is not an unreasonable distance, making it easy to visit, I wonder if I would want to return once I experienced freedom. As previously mentioned, I am on the autism spectrum. Although I am on the milder end, I struggle with managing intense emotions. Therefore, I apologize if my words seem disorganized or overly intense in some areas. I am not adept at conveying my feelings, but I recognized that continuing to bottle everything up would lead to negative outcomes. Thus, I thought sharing this might be a safe approach. Story 4. Do you think I, am 25, made the right decision to end an amazing friendship so one of my 2 best friends, F31, could be happy while I became devastated? Here is my story. I am a 25-year-old man and she is a 31-year-old woman. The age gap never bothered us, we hardly noticed it. I would occasionally joke about it, claiming she was closer to the end of life, but it was always in a playful manner. We connected online, and since we resided more than 300 kilometers apart, we typically met only once or twice a year. Nevertheless, for 4 years, we communicated daily through Discord and Messenger. Last year, I observed that she was more available than usual. We spent New Year's Eve together, chatting and gaming. My plans had fallen through, and her boyfriend was unwell. At that time, it felt entirely normal. However, around Valentine's Day, I started to realize she was consistently around. At one point, she proposed that we go on vacation together. That took me by surprise. It seemed like a significant step. She also invited me on various trips that I was unable to attend. Her behavior shifted. For instance, she humorously said that we would live together in hell after we died. She was fond of horror themes, so the mention of hell was not shocking, but the idea of living together eternally was. There were many other subtle hints, and even a friend who overheard us once inquired why we weren't dating. During this period, I learned she had ended her relationship with her boyfriend. I was uncertain about her intentions regarding me. In June, we went to an erotica-themed convention mostly as a joke, something we had planned previously. As expected, we had separate rooms, but we spent 99 of our time together. One evening, I ordered a nicer ride share, and the driver arrived in a new Tesla. She was ecstatic and remarked, "If we were together, you would have a very enjoyable evening tonight." I was completely taken aback and didn't know how to reply. A few weeks later, after more comments of that nature, I confessed my feelings for her and asked if she perceived our relationship differently. She told me she viewed me merely as a friend. It was painful, but I requested that she refrain from making such jokes for a while so that I could process my emotions. I also explained that if she ever made those jokes again, I would interpret them as serious. A month and a half later, we traveled to Greece for vacation. We spent significant time together, and once again, she made remarks that seemed to overstep the boundaries of friendship. She also expected frequent compliments, which felt more fitting for a romantic relationship than a platonic one. At that moment, I ceased to suppress my feelings. Sadly, a month after our return, I discovered she had met with her ex and was working on rekindling their relationship. I was heartbroken. I felt exploited, as if I had been her temporary emotional support. I was also hurt that she ignored my one request, something critically important to me, despite the fact that I had always respected her boundaries. That's when I made the decision to end the friendship. In hindsight, my mistake was likely terminating things through a text message. However, until then, all of our significant conversations, including disagreements and disputes, had always been conducted via text. I tried to be gracious and share my feelings openly. In response, she told me she despised me. My emotions got the better of me as well, and we had a brief argument, but I never uttered anything harsh because I still cared for her. I just didn't know how to articulate it anymore. The most challenging aspect was that I didn't want to place her in a situation where she had to choose between her relationship and our friendship. Yet, I understood that I couldn't continue to be her friend while harboring love for her. It was unfeasible for me. That is why I made the difficult choice to walk away. This all transpired in early November. At that time, I believed she genuinely despised me. It was painful, but I attempted to come to terms with losing my best friend, despite still being deeply in love with her. By the end of the year, she contacted me under the guise of seeking closure. Initially, she placed blame on me for everything. We began to communicate again, sharing our perspectives. When she highlighted instances in which I had acted incorrectly, I concurred and apologized. I did so several times, although it was not easy. Yet, she never once apologized to me. For instance, I expressed my disdain when she mentioned a mutual acquaintance whom I loathed and had requested she stop discussing. Her reply was that she spent time with him and wished to inform me about it. Conversely, if she ever asked me not to share memes of a specific kind, I respected that and ceased sending them. In that moment, I confessed to her that I had been in love with her for a long time. She stated that she wanted to remain friends, but only if I no longer had feelings for her, even though she was already in a relationship. Ultimately, we did not restore our friendship. I told her that my feelings were complex, they were genuine and profound. We bid farewell. I penned an emotional message, but her reply was cold and distant, something like, "It was nice knowing you." That stung. Even though a month and a half has passed, I still cannot stop thinking about her. Everything triggers memories of her, and I feel tears welling up when I reflect on what we shared and what will never come to be. We had so many plans for future trips together. It breaks my heart. Despite seeing a psychologist and taking medication from a psychiatrist, I do not feel much better. I have been seeking solace in prayer and my faith, but I am still uncertain about what to do. I feel incredibly lost and heartbroken. I do not blame her, though I do harbor some resentment. Yet above all, I continue to love her deeply. Recently, I reached out one last time for my own closure, as we had left things unresolved. I do not know how she responded because I cannot bring myself to read it. Additionally, I have cut myself off from all social media and no longer utilize any of them. I have attempted to distract myself playing games, watching series, collecting vinyl records, reading books, going for walks, and programming, but nothing seems to alleviate my distress. I am at a loss for what else I can do. Summary. Last year, I am 26, developed feelings for a close female friend, 31F, who sent mixed signals, but when I confessed, she insisted we were just friends. Later, she reconciled with her ex and I felt used. I ended the friendship through a text message, which resulted in an argument. Months later, she reached out for closure but never apologized for her actions. I admitted I had loved her, but she stated we could only be friends if I no longer had any feelings. That was impossible for me, so we parted ways. I did not want to force her to choose between her boyfriend and our friendship, but I also could not remain just friends while being in love with her. Now, I am still heartbroken. Therapy, medication, and distractions have not alleviated my pain. I contacted her once more for closure, but have not read her response. I have completely eliminated social media from my life, but I do not know how to move forward.